The lights of Lexington Avenue pulsed like electric veins above the city that never sleeps. Emily walked quickly along the wet sidewalk, her phone pressed to her ear as she tried to keep pace with the takeout bag dangling from her wrist. The night breeze carried the smell of wet asphalt, fried food and old cigarettes, the usual scent at the end of an exhausting shift. "Emily, for God's sake," said Miranda's voice on the other end of the line, cutting through like a cold blade. "So you're about to turn 30. How much longer are you going to wait? Do you want to end up one of those women alone with cats and cheap wine?" Emily rolled her eyes, her stomach twisting. Her mother's tone wasn't new, but it still stung. Every word dripped with judgment and disdain, like every decision Emily made was just further proof of failure. "Mom, I just got off work. Can we please have this conversation later?" "Later? No, sweetheart. Time is passing for you, not for me. Look at your cousin Vanessa, already married to that lawyer, has an apartment on the Upper West Side, always traveling, and you, waiting tables for rude people just to make tips. How long, Emily?" Emily quickened her pace, her sneakers squeaking against the damp pavement. The cold seemed to crawl through her clothes, mixing with the irritation boiling beneath her skin. "And those little flings of yours with unemployed musicians, street artists, honestly, you need a real man. Rich, successful, stable, that's the bare minimum. Love doesn't pay the bills, Emily." She stopped at the corner, heart racing not just from anger, but from exhaustion. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to control her breathing. This wasn't just a lecture, it was a reminder of everything she wasn't. She wasn't rich, she wasn't married, she wasn't successful in her mother's eyes. She was just herself, and apparently that was never enough. "You know what?" she said suddenly, not really thinking. "I have someone, a real man, smart, educated, better than any stuck-up lawyer." Silence. "Oh yeah?" came the reply, dripping with irony. "And who would that be? Another misunderstood artist?" "We're engaged," Emily said, holding her breath. "I was going to tell you at Saturday's dinner, but since you're so eager to interfere, there you go." The pause on the other end was almost satisfying. "Engaged," Miranda repeated, like the word had been spat. "Since when?" "For a while. You'll meet him at the dinner." Emily hung up before her mother could say anything else. Regret hit her immediately, not for what she'd said, but because she'd just created a much bigger problem. Now she had to present someone, and she had no one. She looked around and only then realized she'd wandered off the main streets. She was on a nearly empty side road, where neon signs gave way to shuttered windows and dark alleys. The city here seemed to sleep, or worse, lurk. The sound came fast, sharp, like a blunt thud behind her. Footsteps. Before she could react, a shadow stepped out of the alley to her left. A tall man in a hoodie and baseball cap approached silently. Emily tried to turn back, but he was faster. "Hand over the bag and the phone," he said, his voice low and firm. Her blood ran cold. Emily stepped back, eyes wide, heart pounding like a drum. She tried to reach for her bag slowly, her hands trembling so much the strap slipped. "I said now," the man shouted, stepping forward. That's when she heard another voice. "Hey, get away from her." A second man came running from across the street. He was fast, determined, with tense shoulders and a locked gaze. The mugger turned, surprised, and in a flash, the two were in a scuffle. Emily stood frozen. The newcomer took a punch to the face, but responded with a kick to the mugger's stomach. They stumbled, slipping on the wet sidewalk. The sound of fists, grunts, and bodies hitting concrete. It was all too fast, too brutal. Finally, the mugger fell, cursed loudly, and ran back into the alley, vanishing into the dark as if he'd never been there. The silence left behind was almost suffocating. "You okay?" asked the man who'd saved her, still breathless. Emily stared at him. Even dirty, layered in worn-out clothes with a scruffy beard, he had strong features and a gentle voice. There were small cuts on his cheeks, dirt on his fingers, but his eyes belonged to someone much more complex than he seemed. "Yeah, I think so. Oh my God. You saved me." He gave a half smile, the corner of his mouth stained with dried blood. "Just did what anyone would do." "No, no one does that." She stepped closer. "What's your name?" "Jack. Just Jack. Emily hesitated. The adrenaline still rattled her, but along with it came a strange feeling of curiosity, even trust. It was absurd, but there was something about this man that made her feel safer than any suit-wearing lawyer at her mother's parties. She began, looking around. There's a diner up ahead. Can I buy you a coffee? He looked at her like he wasn't used to hearing that, like no one offered kindness to someone like him. Seriously? Seriously, it's the least I can do after tonight. Jack nodded slowly, as if trying to understand why she hadn't just turned and run. Emily started walking and he followed silently. The city lights shimmered in the puddles, and for the first time that night, Emily felt that fate in its madness might actually be trying to tell her something. Maybe this wasn't just a chance encounter. Maybe it was the beginning of a story even she wouldn't dare make up. The 24-hour diner on the corner of Lexington Avenue was small, lit by buzzing fluorescent lights, with the lingering smell of old coffee and grease baked into the red vinyl booths. Emily chose a table near the window where the outside lights painted watery shapes on the fogged glass. Jack hesitated before sitting down. She noticed he tried not to touch the upholstery too much, as if afraid to dirty the place. The waiter, sleepy and indifferent, took their order. 2 black coffees and a slice of apple pie, insisted on by Emily. "How long have you been living on the streets?" she asked gently. Jack looked at her, his light brown eyes steady but not hard. He didn't seem offended, just thoughtful. "About 2 years, give or take. I stopped counting, really." "You don't seem like most." He let out a short, joyless laugh. "Because I'm not. Or maybe I am now. I used to be something else, but that's not the point." "Sorry, I don't want to pry," Emily said, embarrassed. "It's okay. You're the first person in a long time to actually look me in the eye. I guess that earns you some credit." She leaned back in the booth, trying to figure out why this stranger intrigued her so much. Jack spoke with a clear, direct vocabulary, like someone used to meetings or dense books. His body language wasn't typical either. There was restraint there, repressed elegance. "And you? Why were you out there alone tonight, not paying attention?" Emily scoffed, laughing bitterly. "Because my mum called to remind me I'm getting old, that I need a rich, successful husband, and that my failed artists aren't even fit to shine the shoes of her ideal son-in-law." Jack raised an eyebrow. Ideal son-in-law? Lawyer, rich, arrogant, and of course, mother-approved. He took a sip of the coffee, wincing slightly at the bitterness. "And what did you say to her?" "That I already have a fiancé." She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Only problem is, I don't. I just said it to shut her up." Jack laughed, a real laugh this time, and Emily couldn't help but smile with him. "Impulsive, I like that. Yeah, well, now I have 2 days to find someone to pretend he's marrying me, or she'll destroy me at Saturday's dinner." He looked at her, silent for a moment. "You mean, actually pretend?" Emily studied him closely. His face looked less grimy under the white light. His features were strong, symmetrical, a straight nose, defined jaw. Behind the scruffy beard, he was handsome, even charming. "What if I said yes?" Jack crossed his arms and leaned back into the booth. He seemed amused by the idea, but also took it seriously. "I saved you tonight. You buy me coffee and offer me a fiancé role. That it? It's crazy, I know, but you speak well. You're charismatic. Can you fool my mom for one night? Your mom sounds intense. The word is cruel." He watched the steam rise from the mug for a few seconds. "I'm in." Emily blinked, surprised. "Really? Really? It'll be fun. And somehow, you seem like someone worth helping." She smiled, crooked, skeptical, but genuine. She felt something weird in her stomach, gratitude, and a flicker of hope she didn't want to admit. "So that's it? We pretend we're engaged?" Jack extended his hand like sealing a deal. "Here's to the most well-meaning lie of the week." She shook his hand, warm, firm. "You'll need clothes and a shower and an engagement ring. We'll improvise a ring." Emily looked out the window. Outside, the city kept pulsing, indifferent. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like something was shifting. Like the chaos of the night had placed Jack in her path for a reason. She didn't know what it was yet. But she was certain life was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The clock read 9:02 a.m., When Emily pushed open the wooden door of the building where she lived, a renovated old townhouse in Harlem with creaky stairs and the lingering smell of lukewarm coffee in the hallways. She hadn't slept well. She'd spent most of the night wondering if she was crazy for inviting a stranger, a homeless man, to pretend to be her fiancé. But something inside her insisted that Jack wasn't just what he appeared to be. He'd said yes without hesitation, without asking for anything in return, without seeming eager for food, shelter, or money. There was an almost unsettling calm in the way he existed, as if he'd lived through 1,000 versions of the same life and was merely watching the next one unfold. "Okay, Emily," she murmured to herself as she climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. "Now you've got 2 days to turn a dirty man into Prince Charming. Easy." Later that same morning, Emily returned to the spot where she'd found him the night before, outside the Lexington Avenue diner. And there he was, sitting on the sidewalk, leaning against the wall, arms crossed and eyes closed as if sleeping upright. A crumpled paper bag with a donated sandwich rested beside him. "Jack," she called softly. His eyes opened slowly. He didn't look surprised. He just looked at her with that same neutral, calm expression. "You came, and you stayed," she replied, not hiding her relief. He stood up with unexpected agility for someone in his condition, picked up the bag, tossed it in a trash can, and walked over to her as if he wasn't about to step into a completely different world. "I've got a plan," Emily said. "First, a shower, then clothes. You need to look like, at the very least, someone my mother won't try to kick out of the house in the first 5 minutes. Fair." She brought him to her apartment. On the way, Jack didn't say much. He just observed the streets, the people, the details most others ignored. Emily, though nervous, felt strangely at ease, like his presence calmed something in her. When they arrived, Jack entered respectfully. He took off his shoes automatically, though they were old and practically soulless. Emily pointed toward the bathroom. Clean towels on the hook, there's soap, shampoo, everything in there. He nodded a thank you and disappeared behind the door. Emily stood in the middle of the living room staring at her hands. What was she doing? Where was this absurd trust in someone she'd known for less than 24 hours coming from? Maybe it wasn't trust. Maybe it was exhaustion. Exhaustion from pretending to be someone who pleased her mother, from dating men who presented themselves like trophies but were empty inside, from shrinking herself to fit into other people's expectations. When Jack came out of the bathroom 20 minutes later, she almost didn't recognize him. His clean face revealed strong, symmetrical features with light brown eyes that seemed to see more than they should. His hair, now damp and finger-combed, had a careless charm. The stubble was still there but trimmed, giving him a mature, attractive look. The plain white t-shirt and worn jeans Emily had lent him from an ex didn't fit perfectly, but they were enough to make the transformation visible. She stayed silent for a second. "You look like someone who could give a lecture at a university," she said, half joking. "Let's hope your mum thinks so too," he replied with a subtle smile. Emily laughed, but her stomach tightened. Now that the costume was in place, what unsettled her most was how Jack looked like he belonged in it. As if he'd played this part before. And maybe he had. She shook her head to clear the thought. "We don't have much time. I'm going to teach you everything about me and everything my mother expects to hear. We need to rehearse." Jack nodded. "Go ahead. I promise to memorize every word." "And you? You're not going to make up a backstory?" He thought for a moment. "I think it's safer not to lie too much. I'd rather leave some gaps in the character. Sometimes not knowing is more believable than making something up." Emily found that sensible, scarily sensible, as if he had experience pretending to be something he wasn't. They sat at the kitchen table. She opened her laptop, typed out a few notes, and began explaining everything. Dates, names, childhood events, little stories that would validate their fictional relationship. As she spoke, she noticed something odd. Jack was genuinely paying attention. He wasn't just nodding or pretending to care. He absorbed it. He commented. He pointed out small inconsistencies. It was like rehearsing with a professional actor. Morning turned to afternoon, and the afternoon slipped by like water. When she finally looked at the clock, it was almost 5 p.m. She didn't want to admit it, but she was enjoying having him there. The way her apartment felt fuller, more alive. Jack stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. What if she hates me on sight? Emily looked at him for a moment. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable. You don't have to win her over. You just have to help me keep up the act. After that, you can disappear if you want. Jack turned to her, serious. And you? Me? After this, what? Will you want to disappear too? Emily didn't answer. Maybe she didn't know yet. The kettle began to boil, filling the kitchen with steam and a soft, comforting sound. Emily sliced old bread for toast, but her eyes kept drifting toward the bathroom door, as if Jack might vanish at any second. He'd been in there 15 minutes, washing off a past she still didn't know. Deep down, she still couldn't believe he'd said yes. Am I really doing this? She thought. The door opened. Jack came out with a towel over his shoulders and damp hair combed back with his fingers. The stubble trimmed, his eyes more alert than the night before. He wore a white t-shirt and jeans slightly too big that Emily had dug from the back of her closet, leftovers from an ex she preferred not to name. Emily almost didn't recognize him. Wow, she said, unable to hide her reaction. Jack raised an eyebrow, wary. Wow good or wow concerning? Wow like you could easily convince someone you're just an offbeat investment analyst. He laughed. A rich guy with a soul? The kind who wears button-downs and crystal necklaces? Exactly. The kind my mother would approve of, she said, crossing her arms. Jack smiled, but the silence that followed was a heavy one. Emily pointed to the table. Coffee? Toast? If there's butter, you've won me over, he said, pulling out a chair. Over breakfast, the two spoke more than they had the entire night before. Emily talked about her job at the restaurant, how she'd started working young because she always wanted to be independent. She shared that her dad had died when she was a teenager, and since then her mother had claimed the throne of the family, strict, demanding, obsessed with status. Jack listened, not the kind of passive listening full of uh-huh and I see. He truly listened, and when he replied, every word felt considered. You carry a weight that isn't yours, he said after a while. You try to fill the emptiness your mother left by being strong all the time. Emily swallowed hard. You talk like someone who's analyzed a lot of people. Jack looked out the window, thoughtful. Sometimes we see in others what we tried to hide in ourselves. She didn't respond, just stared into her empty mug. She felt exposed, but strangely at peace. Well, she said, changing the subject, now we need to rehearse. By Saturday, you've got to be my perfect fiancé. Easy. What do I need to know? Everything about me. Where we met, trips, quirks, nicknames, names of my family, my childhood dog. Jack raised his hands, laughing. Hold up. Give me pen and paper. I don't want to get caught forgetting the dog's name. It was Max, and he hated everyone except my grandma. Noted, he said, smiling. Emily pulled out a notebook and began listing topics while Jack listened and jotted things down. Every detail of the fake story came together with surprising ease. When she made up a trip to Vermont, he added scenic descriptions like he'd actually been there. When she mentioned a silly fight, he created imaginary dialogue with perfect comedic timing. Have you acted before? She asked, suspicious. Not professionally, but you improvise really well. Let's just say I've had to pretend to be things I'm not. And sometimes, pretending is easier than being honest. Emily bit her lower lip. She sensed there was something behind his words. But she also sensed it wasn't time to ask. The afternoon faded slowly. Sunlight painted the apartment walls in a warm, golden hue. Emily got up and walked to the kitchen to fetch wine. She grabbed the only bottle she kept for special occasions, and for some reason tonight felt like it qualified. You like cheap wine? She asked, offering him a glass. Jack took it. I love anything that doesn't come in a paper cup. They toasted in silence. A quiet toast, heavy with tension, complicity, and maybe a hint of fear. What if she figures it out? Jack asked, looking into his glass. Who? Your mother? If she does. Emily took a sip, watching him over the rim. We'll improvise. You're good at that, remember? Jack nodded, but his eyes drifted. He seemed to be in two places at once, here with her and somewhere else in memory. What if I... like this? He murmured, almost to himself. Like what? Pretending I belong. Pretending I'm your fiancé. Emily stared at him. His eyes weren't joking anymore. There was weight in them, a disguised confession. We agreed this was just theater, she said firmly. Just until Saturday. I know. The silence returned, but this time it filled the air with an uncomfortable intimacy. Emily stood, walked to the bookshelf, pretending to look for something. There's a couch for you, she said, not turning around. It's clean. I put on fresh sheets. Thanks, Jack said quietly. Good night, fiancé, she said from the hallway doorway, forcing a smile. He replied with a subtle nod. Good night, fiancé. In the middle of the night, Emily woke up. The apartment was quiet, except for a soft sound coming from the living room. Curious, she got up barefoot and peeked out. Jack was sitting on the couch, reading the notebook filled with their relationship notes. The dim lamplight lit part of his face. He read slowly, like someone studying an important script. Seriously. Emily backed away before he could see her. She returned to bed with a strange feeling, a tight knot between the lie and something else she couldn't name. But that had already started to grow. Saturday dawned under a cloud-covered sky, as if even the weather knew the day was going to be strange. Emily woke early, her heart pounding in her chest like it had something to hide. Because it did. She got up slowly, trying not to wake Jack. But when she stepped out of the bedroom, the couch was empty. For a second, panic gripped her. Had he left? But then the smell of coffee reached her before he did. Jack was in the kitchen, his back to her, carefully stirring 2 mugs on the counter. Morning, he said without turning around. Emily blinked, surprised. You wake up before the sun? Force of habit, he replied, turning to her with a faint smile. The streets don't have a snooze button. She laughed, even if she didn't mean to. There was something about the way he just existed that made her uneasy. It felt too real to be pretend. You ready for the battlefield? She asked, taking a mug from his hands. Like a soldier before the landing. Emily studied his face in the morning light, clean-shaven, hair neater, posture upright. In the light blue dress shirt she'd borrowed from a co-worker and the tailored pants she'd snagged last minute from a thrift store, Jack looked different. Not just different. He looked perfect, and that scared her. You're going to fool everyone, she said, more to herself than to him. Jack looked at her for a moment. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Emily didn't have an answer, so she looked away and went to get ready. In the taxi on the way to her mother's apartment, the silence between them was heavy. The car moved slowly through the city, and Lexington Avenue faded behind them, a place where things made more sense. Ahead lay Miranda's world, the universe of silverware, fake smiles, and truths dressed up as good manners. Emily stared out the window, her eyes unfocused. She's going to try to tear you apart, she warned at last. Jack didn't seem concerned. Good thing I'm already torn. Less work for her. She smiled, but a weight pressed on her chest. If you want to leave at any point, just say the word. Jack turned to her. Emily, I'm here because I want to be. You don't have to protect me. She only nodded, but inside her emotions were much louder. The building where Miranda lived seemed designed to intimidate. Marble walls, a receptionist in white gloves, mirrored elevator. Emily walked like someone returning to the judgment arena. Jack, on the other hand, looked comfortable. He observed the details like an actor studying a new character. At the apartment door, she paused. Last chance to run, she whispered. Let's face it, he replied. She took a deep breath and rang the bell. The door opened almost instantly. Miranda appeared with a stiff smile, dressed in a navy silk dress, flawless makeup, and eyes like scanners. The moment she saw Jack, her smile faltered slightly, like she was trying to process what she was seeing. Mom, this is Jack, my fiancé. Miranda kept her expression firm. Pleasure, she said, offering a cold hand. Jack took it gently. The pleasure's mine, Mrs. Miranda. Or may I call you future mother-in-law? The line caught everyone off guard, including Emily, but it worked. Miranda forced a chuckle. Come in, dinner's almost ready. They entered. The living room was immaculate. Linen tablecloth, tall candlesticks, porcelain dishes. 4 other people were already there. 2 of Emily's aunts, one of their husbands, and a younger cousin, all draped in designer clothes and shallow conversation. Emily felt the weight of their eyes land on her. Everyone, she said, clearing her throat, this is Jack. Jack greeted each person with poise. His gestures were unhurried, his speech confident. When someone asked what he did for a living, he replied, currently, informal strategic consulting. But before that, let's just say I tested many paths. The phrase was just mysterious enough to be respectable, and just vague enough to avoid follow-ups. Emily watched him, torn between admiration and anxiety. It was like watching someone walk a tightrope and praying no one noticed there was no safety net. During the first few minutes of dinner, Jack proved more prepared than she ever imagined. He spoke knowledgeably about international politics, commented on the artwork hanging like trophies on the apartment walls, and even complimented the wine without sounding like a suck-up. Miranda, however, wasn't relaxing. At any moment she seemed ready to pounce. And Emily knew the real test was still coming. Dinner was served with ceremony: herb-crusted salmon, grilled asparagus, truffle mashed potatoes, dishes designed more to impress than to nourish. Emily barely touched her food. Jack, on the other hand, ate with grace, cutting each bite with precision and perfect posture. Even that made him seem like he belonged. It was almost comical. But Miranda was restless. Her eyes followed Jack like X-rays. She studied him, his gestures, his silences, his measured smiles. She was hunting for a crack. And by the 3rd glass of wine, she struck. So, Jack, she began, dabbing the corners of her mouth with a linen napkin. You said you work in strategic consulting. Informally, yes, he replied calmly. More of a human observation exercise than a formal career. Miranda forced a smile. And does that pay? I mean, enough for a wedding, children, stability? Emily froze. That wasn't curiosity. It was a trap. Jack smiled, unbothered. It pays in knowledge, and sometimes perspective. Stability can come in other forms, not just a bank balance. Miranda leaned back in her chair, her gaze sharp. A very romantic view of life. And you, Emily? Since when were you into men with perspective instead of plans? The table fell silent. Silverware paused. Emily felt her skin burn. Since I realized plans without character are just selfish strategies, she replied coldly. The silence stretched. Jack remained serene, like he'd anticipated every move. But Miranda wasn't finished. Jack, dear, she said, her voice sweet but poisoned. Tell me, where do you live? Emily opened her mouth to cut in, but Jack answered first. Right now, with Emily. Ah, of course, she said, laughing. Before that, he held her gaze. Places that change. I've been in penthouses and on sidewalks, but wherever I was, I tried to keep one thing constant: the truth. Miranda set her fork down with a thud. And what truth would that be? Emily couldn't take it anymore. Her voice came out low but firm. That he's a man of value, and you're trying to tear down someone you don't even know. Miranda turned to her, surprised. Emily, please. No, she cut in. You want to know where he lives, what he has in the bank? Fine, Jack is homeless. He saved me when I was being mugged. He's dirty, yes. He lives on the street, yes. But he treated me with more dignity than any man you've ever introduced me to. The shock at the table was total. Miranda turned pale. The aunts choked. The cousin opened his mouth but made no sound. Jack remained calm, the only one unfazed by the bombshell. This is a joke? Miranda asked, lowering her voice as if that could restore control. Emily, you brought a vagrant to family dinner. I brought the man who respected me before he even knew my name, she shot back, and who defended me with his body, something no one else here would have done. Miranda closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, her face had changed. No more filters, no more pretense, just pure disdain. You're sick. You've outdone yourself. This is humiliating. Jack looked at Emily. I can leave if you want. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes burned. No, you stay. And just then the living room door opened, revealing a new figure. Robert, the famous interior designer, a close friend of the family, as always arriving fashionably late. Forgive me, he said, removing his coat. Traffic was hell and the new driver doesn't know how to use GPS. He froze in the middle of the room. Robert's eyes locked onto Jack's. The color drained from his face. My God, he whispered. It's you. Everyone turned. You know each other? Miranda asked, trying to piece it together. Robert stepped forward. Of course I do. That's Jackson Harrington Carter. Jackson, heir to the Harrington Group, owns half the financial holdings on the East Coast. The silence that followed was almost violent. Emily stared at Jack, stunned. What? Miranda's eyes went wide like she'd seen a ghost. Robert kept talking, now staring at Jack in disbelief. You disappeared, vanished off the map. They said you had a breakdown, gave up everything, went into seclusion. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath. It wasn't a breakdown, Robert. It was a choice. A choice? Yes. I got tired of electric fences, six-figure meetings, and people pretending to care. I wanted to see the world as it really is. Meet real people. Miranda brought a hand to her mouth. Emily stepped back as if the floor had vanished. Jack turned to her. You met me when I was no one, and you still saw me, respected me, welcomed me. He took a step closer. Now you know who I am, but does that change anything? Emily looked at him. The world was spinning, and somehow he remained the one steady point. No, she said, it just proves I was right. And in that moment, something collapsed. Not in Emily, in Miranda. Because for the first time in her life, she was on the wrong side of the truth. The silence still hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Robert sat down slowly, as if still trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Emily stood frozen, her body caught in time, eyes fixed on Jack, the man who up until minutes ago had been nothing more than a well-spoken homeless man. Now he was Jackson Harrington Carter, a name with enough weight to shatter any doubt, any argument, any wall of prejudice Miranda had built. And speaking of her, Miranda was pale, drained of color and words, which for her was the emotional equivalent of an earthquake. Is this some kind of joke? She finally asked, her voice low, dry, scratchy. A performance? Jack crossed his arms and looked at her steadily. You appreciate appearances, so I imagine you enjoy a good act. But this wasn't one. I just didn't need to say who I was, until it mattered. You let my daughter believe she was involved with a vagrant. She didn't believe it. She chose it, even without knowing my last name, my bank balance, or how many companies I own. Miranda turned to Emily, fury in her eyes. And you knew? Since when? Emily answered calmly. Just now, same as you. So you brought a stranger, a dirty drifter into my house? Jack didn't flinch. You have an interesting way of treating your guests. I treat people as they deserve, Miranda snapped, and you're clearly still a lunatic who abandoned his own fortune to play poor on the street. Robert cleared his throat nervously, as if trying to restore balance. Miranda, maybe this isn't the time to— Stay out of this, Robert, she snapped. Emily raised her voice for the first time. Enough! The table fell silent again. All eyes turned to her. Enough, Mom. You spent my whole life telling me I needed a man with money, status, influence. Now one's standing in front of you, and you still can't accept him because he didn't arrive the way you expected. Miranda tried to speak, but Emily didn't give her the chance. You taught me to judge by clothes, last names, business cards, and still the man who defended me on the street, who sat at this table and treated everyone with respect, is the one you called garbage. You embarrass me, and you disgust me. The words echoed. None of the guests dared breathe. Jack stood. I think I should go. Emily looked at him, as if trying to decipher what came next. He looked calm, but she could see the weight in his eyes. You don't have to. I know I don't. but I think this performance has gotten enough applause for one night." He looked at Miranda one last time. "One day, you might learn that dignity doesn't live in penthouses or surnames, but I doubt you're ready for that." And then he turned and walked out. The door closed with a soft click. His absence filled the room with more presence than when he'd been there. Emily grabbed her purse. "I'm leaving too." "If you walk out that door, don't come back," Miranda said. Emily turned unhurried. "That's not a threat anymore, it's a gift." And she left. Outside, Jack was leaning against the hallway wall, as if he knew she'd follow. Emily stopped in front of him. They stood there for eternal seconds, just looking at each other. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, not with anger, just a deep weariness. "Because for the first time in a long time, someone saw me for who I am, not what I have. And now," Jack sighed, "now you know everything, and if you still want me around, I'll stay." Emily smiled, small, real. "You're still my fiancé, remember? That was a lie. Not all of it." He stepped forward. "So, what was real?" She reached out and touched his face, the rough stubble, the calm gaze. "This." Jack leaned in slowly. The kiss was soft, hesitant, filled with doubt and certainty at once. When their lips parted, Emily could still taste the truth. And in that cold hallway between walls of luxury, she realized that sometimes you have to wear a lie to find what's most real. Night fell over Manhattan like a gray velvet curtain. The city lights began flickering on in waves as Emily and Jack walked silently down the block. The dinner, the scandal, the revelation, all of it felt like a blur behind them. Only their footsteps, distant cars, and their own thoughts accompanied them now. Emily, arms crossed, held her coat tightly against her chest. She didn't know if she was cold or just needed to shield herself from something bigger. Jack walked beside her with his hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. She was the one who finally broke the silence. "You never intended to tell me, did you?" Jack took his time to answer. He seemed to weigh each word. "I did. I just didn't know when or how. And when we met, I still thought I'd vanish the next day." "Why didn't you?" He looked at her. His light brown eyes were more serious than ever. "Because you didn't treat me like a project or a charity case. You just listened, saw me." Emily stopped walking. She leaned against a lamppost, took a deep breath. "So what happened? I mean, really, you're the heir to an empire. Why give it all up and live like a ghost?" Jack leaned against the wall beside her, watching the traffic in the distance. "My father died of a heart attack at 54, CEO of 3 banks, 3 marriages, 3 kids in 3 different countries, built an empire, and left me with not a single good memory. I was the direct successor. Started working with him at 19. Learned to command rooms, manipulate people, close deals worth more than small nations. But the truth is, I hated every second of it." He paused, not dramatically, just painfully. "When he died, I inherited everything, and for a while I tried to carry on, but every morning I woke up disgusted with myself. I felt like I was living someone else's life. The money surrounded me, but never touched me. I didn't trust anyone. No one saw me. No one said good morning without wanting something in return." Emily listened in silence. There was no room for judgment here. "So I disappeared, just like that. Grabbed a cap, some old clothes, and started walking. No one understood. They said I'd lost my mind, maybe I did, but honestly, I just wanted to breathe." "And did you find what you were looking for?" He hesitated. "I found pain, hunger, cold. But I also found things I never would have seen otherwise. Invisible people with stories stronger than any CEOs. Old men sharing soup in winter. Kids who still smile without a blanket to call their own. And then, I found you." Emily looked away, trying to hold back her emotions. "I don't know what to do with this," she confessed. "I don't know how to go back to my world tomorrow and pretend everything's the same." "Maybe you don't have to go back the same," Jack said. "Maybe we don't have to go back at all. Just move forward." She looked at him. "Are you planning to go back to your life, to your empire?" Jack smiled, but there was sadness underneath. "I don't know. Part of me wants to reclaim the power and rebuild it differently. Do something that matters. The other part just wants to keep walking with you and drinking coffee at a diner at 3 a.m. Emily stepped closer. You still want to move forward with me? Jack didn't hesitate. That never changed. Even though I'm not rich, not influential, not the fiancé your family would expect. You're the only person who saw me when I was no one, and that's worth more than any fortune. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she needed her whole body to accept the truth. Okay, then let's figure this out together. He reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers. It's a start. Emily pulled him into a hug, tight, long, silent. There in the middle of the sidewalk, between honking cars and glowing streetlights, two worlds that were never meant to meet held each other, and no bank account, last name, or family dinner could erase what was already real. The next morning, Emily woke to her phone vibrating. Then again, and again. Within minutes, her screen looked like a silent siren. Messages, missed calls, social media alerts, emails with subject lines in all caps. She blinked, confused, still lying in bed, and it took a few seconds to understand what was happening. Jack was still asleep on the couch. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting a calm glow on his face, a calm that was about to be shattered. Emily sat up, slid her finger across the screen, and opened the first message. Girl, is it true about the millionaire guy in disguise? It's in the gossip columns. The second, you guys are trending on Twitter. OMG, Emily. The third was a link to a celebrity news site. Disappeared billionaire CEO found pretending to be homeless, and he's engaged to a regular waitress. She dropped the phone on the mattress with a thud and ran to the living room. Jack. He opened his eyes slowly, still groggy. Morning. We're everywhere. Jack sat up, rubbing his face. What do you mean? She handed him the phone. He read for a few seconds. No immediate reaction, just a deep breath. I knew this could happen. But not like this. Not this fast. Emily started pacing the room. How did they find out? Was it Robert? Or my mother? Jack shook his head. Doesn't matter who. What matters is what we do now. She stared at him, unsure what to say. My boss already texted. The press called the restaurant. They're calling me the Cinderella of Harlem. And one page asked if I got pregnant on purpose to trap you. They'll always try to turn everything into a story that sells, Jack said calmly. Because the world prefers simple fairy tales, poor girl. Mysterious prince. Lies sell better than nuance. Emily sat down beside him. I don't know if I can handle this. You don't have to handle it alone. But my life wasn't public, Jack. Yours was. Now it's all a circus. He took a breath, eyes lowered. I hid for 2 years to escape this. But maybe I'm ready to stop hiding. As long as I don't have to do it without you. She squeezed his hand tightly. What if they start following us? Digging for pictures? Trying to push you back onto your throne? Jack looked around. The modest apartment, the messy living room, the lumpy couch. Then maybe it's time I turn that throne into something else, but on my terms, with the values you helped me rediscover. Emily let out a nervous laugh. All I did was offer you coffee and a place to sleep. And that was enough to remind me I'm human. The hours that followed were a blur. Reporters started showing up at the building entrance. A black car parked outside and didn't move all afternoon. A drone buzzed past the window at 5 p.m. Emily stayed locked inside, curtains drawn. Jack spoke quietly on the phone with someone named Anthony, his former personal aide now summoned out of necessity. Yes, I'll speak, but on my terms. No press conference, no public statement. I want a peace. A letter, maybe. Nothing corporate. Just real. He hung up and sat on the living room floor back against the wall. Emily was on the rug, legs crossed, idly stirring a cup of cold tea. Are you really ready to go back? Jack took his time to respond. I'm ready to reclaim my name, but not my mask. Does that even exist? She asked honestly. A millionaire who rejects the system and still gets accepted by it? I don't know. but maybe it's time to show it can. She looked at him. His beard was starting to grow back. His eyes no longer held shadows, just the weight of decision. "It's going to be hard," Emily whispered. "I never promised easy. I only promised it would be with you." Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. The next morning, Jack's piece was published across major outlets. "Letter from a Man Who Disappeared" by Jackson Harrington Carter. It was simple, sincere, no embellishments, no defense. He explained the pressure, the loss of identity, the escape. And he ended with a line. "I found myself in a dirty alley, next to a woman who didn't know me but saw me. To her, I owe everything I am now, and if that's weakness, may we all be weak." Emily read the letter sitting in the kitchen. Outside, camera flashes still flickered against the windows, but inside something had settled. It wouldn't be a simple life, but for the first time, it was a life being built, and she would be part of it. In the days that followed the letter's publication, Emily's apartment became a fortress under siege. Reporters in designer suits and giant cameras took turns outside the building. Even her neighbors started complaining, not directly to her, of course, but whispering in the halls, shooting glances that ranged from curious to hostile. Jack didn't leave the apartment without a cap and sunglasses, and even then, people occasionally recognized him. Zoomed-in paparazzi shots flooded the internet. "Ex-billionaire reappears thinner with new partner," some headlines said. Others were less kind. "Waitress seduces rebel heir and takes control of the narrative." Emily tried not to read them, but it was impossible to avoid everything. She was on the couch scrolling through social media when an unexpected message arrived. "We're producing a documentary about Jackson Carter's journey. We'd like to invite you for an exclusive interview about your story together." The message came with a signature, a logo from a streaming platform. It left a metallic taste in her mouth. "Jack," she said, holding out the screen. He read it silently, then handed the phone back. "I expected this." "And? Nothing? I'm not selling my pain as entertainment." Emily leaned back, relieved. But she knew not every offer would be that easy to turn down. 2 days later, Jack was summoned to a meeting with the Harrington Financial Group board. It was held on the top floor of one of the city's oldest and most luxurious buildings. The conference room had polished marble floors and a view that swallowed the entire Manhattan skyline. Emily waited at a nearby coffee shop. Her coffee went cold before the second update arrived. Jack exited the meeting with a neutral expression, but tension lingered in his shoulders. "They want me to come back," he said as they walked through the chilly late afternoon streets. "With a celebration, a press release, a new image, clean and polished, the prodigal son narrative." "And what did you say?" Jack looked up at the cloudy sky for a moment. "I told them I'm not that guy anymore. If they want me back, it'll be on my terms, and with you at my side." Emily stopped. "You said that?" "Word for word." She smiled, but it was an uncertain smile. "And did they accept it?" "They're still processing, but they don't have a choice. I own the table, even if they forgot." She stayed quiet for a moment, walking beside him. "And what if you do go back? Like, really back?" Jack stopped walking. "You mean suits and endless meetings?" "I mean power, everything that comes with it." He took her hand. "Then I go back with you holding my hand, or I don't go back at all." That night, Emily was woken by the sound of her phone vibrating. Jack was asleep beside her, his face peaceful, finally free of secrets. The screen showed a call. "Unknown," she answered, still half asleep. "Hello," a male voice replied. "Good evening. This is Charles Lancaster from the Harrington Finance Board. You're Emily, correct?" "Yes, why?" "We're undergoing a restructuring and we'd like to speak with you, discreetly, about the influence you have over Jackson." Emily sat up, cold creeping into her spine. "What do you mean?" "Your presence is affecting major decisions, negotiations. He made it clear you'd be involved. That concerns us." "What exactly do you want from me?" "Just a conversation, perhaps to understand how willing you are to let him become who he needs to be." She didn't respond. The line went silent for a moment. "Miss Bennet," the voice continued, "sometimes great men lose themselves in small passions. Don't let that be the case." She hung up and sat there, watching Jack sleep. His face, calm at peace, trusted her, but the world around them was already trying to pull him back into a gilded cage. The next morning, Emily made coffee. Jack walked into the kitchen in a sweatshirt, his hair messy. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. "Almost," she replied, not mentioning the call. He looked at her as if he sensed something. "What's wrong?" Emily hesitated, then said, "You own an empire, Jack, and I'm just me." "Don't say that. I can see how badly the world wants you back, and maybe you need to go." Jack stepped closer, took her face in his hands. "Listen closely. The world may want me, but I choose you, and I won't let them turn us into a story that isn't ours. And if they try, then we rewrite everything from scratch." Emily felt her chest loosen. The world didn't matter. What mattered was that look, that conviction, that choice. "You ready to start over?" "With you, always." And in that moment, their lives stopped being a scandal and returned to what they'd been from the start. An improbable meeting of two truths, one that was running from the top and one that had learned to endure at the bottom. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner. As always, the media eventually found another scandal, another celebrity, another fake wedding to obsess over. The headlines disappeared from the front pages, reporters left the building entrance, and the city went back to being just a city. Jack and Emily had moved into a small loft in Brooklyn, rented by him, chosen by her. It had exposed brick, large windows, and not an ounce of ostentation, exactly what they both wanted. He called it the perfect middle ground, far from the corporate world, but with room to dream again. Every morning, Jack walked to a nearby public library, not to hide, but to study. He read books on economics, history, philosophy, politics, said he needed to reorganize his mind before deciding what to do with everything he'd inherited. Emily, on the other hand, still worked at the restaurant 3 days a week, not out of necessity, but out of stubbornness. "It keeps me grounded," she said. It was strange how routine, even in the midst of so much change, made them feel normal, as if all the chaos had just been a temporary detour. They cooked together, read at night, debated old movies, argued about dishes. Jack had learned to appreciate cheap wine. Emily had learned to appreciate silence. On Wednesday afternoon, Emily came home early from the restaurant. She was tired, sweaty, and smelled like fryer oil. She tossed her backpack on the couch, kicked off her shoes, and headed straight to the kitchen. On the counter, she found an envelope. White. No return address. Heavy paper. She opened it slowly. Inside, a formal invitation with elegant lettering. Mrs. Miranda Bennet cordially invites her daughter, Emily Bennet, and Mr. Jackson Carter to a private dinner this Friday at 8:01 p.m. Usual address. Formal attire. Punctuality appreciated. She sat down, stared at the invitation for a few seconds, reread it, then laughed, alone, almost mockingly. "Now she wants to have dinner," she murmured. When Jack returned from the library that evening, he found Emily on the couch, still holding the envelope. "What's that?" She handed it to him without a word. He read it and raised an eyebrow. Formal, cold, classy. Peak Miranda. "You going?" Still deciding whether to wear a dress nor a t-shirt that says, "I told you so." Jack smiled, then turned serious. "What does she want?" "Control. That's always been it. Or maybe she's trying to fix what she broke." "She doesn't fix. She rebrands appearances." Jack sat beside her. "We don't have to go. We can pretend this envelope never arrived." Emily stayed silent. She was tired of running, tired of always being afraid of her mother. As absurd as it was, something inside her wanted to look Miranda in the eyes again, not with hatred, but with clarity. "I'm going," she said finally, "but not for her, for me." Jack nodded, respecting the tone. "Then we go together. You'll have to wear a blazer. And you, heels?" She gave him a half smile. "We'll negotiate." On Friday night, Emily wore a simple black dress with just a touch of sparkle and a shade of red lipstick she rarely used. Jack appeared in a charcoal grey blazer and a collarless shirt. Elegant but still slightly off script, just how he liked it. In the car on the way to Miranda's, Emily was quiet. There was no longer the nervousness of the first time. This was a different kind of tension, the kind you carry when you no longer need to prove anything, but still feel the sting of old scars. "You know what's funny?" she said, looking out the window. "What?" "Part of me still wants to hear her say, 'I'm sorry,' like that would fix everything." "Maybe it would fix something. Maybe it just proves I still care." Jack didn't answer. He simply took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. That was all she needed. When they arrived, the building looked the same. Cold, perfect, distant. The elevator rose in silence to the 22nd floor. The door opened. The apartment was softly lit, the table set for 3, not 6, not 8. Miranda appeared soon after. She wore a beige dress, hair in a bun, light makeup. Her eyes were alert, but softer than usual. "Emily, Jack, thank you for coming." Emily looked at her mother with neutrality. "What's the reason for the invitation?" "Let's sit first." They sat. Jack beside Emily, as before. Miranda across from them, as always. Dinner was served by a hired waiter. No other guests, no distractions. When the main course arrived, Miranda exhaled. "I've made a lot of mistakes." Emily continued cutting her meat without looking up. "That's not news, but I need to say it out loud. Not for you, for me." Jack watched in silence. He knew this moment wasn't his. "I raised you to be strong, Emily, but I confused strength with control, and love with demands. I saw you drift away, and thought it was rebellion, when it was just freedom." Emily finally looked up. Her mother's face didn't flinch, but her eyes, they weren't so armored. "I didn't come here for formal apologies." "This isn't formal. I don't know how to apologize. I never had to learn." "That I believe." Miranda smiled almost sadly. "I want to start over. With you. With both of you." Emily took a deep breath. "And what does that mean?" Miranda set her utensils down carefully. "I want you to know about the foundation I'm creating. It's focused on reintegrating people experiencing homelessness. In honor of Jack's father and your courage, I want you both to be part of it." Silence. Emily blinked. She hadn't expected that. Jack crossed his arms, attentive. "Why?" he asked. "Because for decades I ignored everything outside my narrow line of sight, and because my daughter showed me that not everything that shines is valuable, but what survives the dirt. That's precious." Emily felt something break inside her. Not anger, not pain, maybe relief. Maybe it was the start of something neither of them knew how to name, but it was there, for the first time. Emily's fork hovered in the air, suspended between her plate and a response she wasn't sure she wanted to give. Her mother's proposal hung in the air with equal weight. Miranda, the woman who spent a lifetime teaching that worth was measured in labels, was now offering to launch a foundation in the name of dignity for those without even a roof. It felt like a joke, but there was no laughter. Jack broke the silence, voice low but steady. "This isn't a small thing." Miranda looked at him. The hostility from weeks ago seemed to have faded, replaced by something more human, maybe shame, maybe recognition. "It's not," she said. "And it's not an excuse, it's an attempt. I can't erase what I said or thought about you, but I can use what I have to change something." Emily set her fork down. "Why now?" she asked, locking eyes with her mother. Miranda took a moment to answer. "Because seeing you two together showed me something I've always ignored. Real love doesn't need pedigree, it just needs courage. And maybe, if I'd had more of that, your life would have been different. Less judged, less lonely." Her daughter stayed quiet. Truthfully, she didn't know how to react. There was something noble in the gesture, but also the echo of her mother's old game. Grand gestures to avoid real conversations. "If you really want to start over," Emily said, "then start without the glamour. No launch cocktail, no magazine coverage. Start small, start on the street." Miranda nodded slowly as if she were absorbing more than just the words. "Will you help me?" "I can show you where not to step, but you'll have to walk it alone, Mom." There was something that flickered in Miranda's eyes. Not tears, she rarely cried, but maybe pride, or gratitude, or just the first real crack in that always composed facade. Jack remained silent, but his presence filled the space between the two women, as if connecting worlds that hadn't spoken in years. After dinner, Miranda walked them to the door. Before saying goodbye, she turned to Jack. "Jackson. Just Jack, please." She hesitated, then smiled. "Jack, thank you for staying." "Even when you had every reason to walk away," he replied gently. "Sometimes it's in the most unlikely place that we find a reason to stay." She nodded, and this time there was no superiority in her eyes, only respect. In the car on the way home, Emily kept her face turned to the window. The Manhattan lights passed like ghosts in the glass. Jack sat beside her, saying nothing, just waiting. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm not sure I believe her." "You don't have to, not yet," he said softly. "You just need to see what she does with what she said. And if it's just another image stunt, then the truth will show. It always does. And if it's a lie, we step back." Emily let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing. "It was strange, seeing my mom try to be human." "Hurts more than when she pretends to be stone?" She thought for a moment. "It hurts differently. It hurts because it gives me hope. And hope is the most dangerous feeling of all." Jack looked at her tenderly. "But it's also the one that saves us." That night, Emily dreamed of her father. She didn't remember his face clearly, but she knew it was him. In the dream, he watched her from afar as she walked across a glass bridge suspended over nothingness, and she walked, without falling. When she woke, Jack was still asleep. She lay there looking at him, feeling a calm she hadn't known since childhood. As if somehow everything was beginning to realign, not quickly, not perfectly, but honestly. 2 days later, Miranda sent another envelope. This time, no formal invitation, just a simple folded piece of paper. "First meeting with local street organization reps. Thursday 9 a.m. Bronx, modest venue, coffee's on me." In the corner, handwritten, "You asked me to start on the street. I'm going." Emily looked at Jack. "I think the old lioness is learning to walk barefoot." He smiled. "And if she falls?" "We watch, but we don't cushion the landing." Jack pulled her close. "Her daughter's good at that." She laughed. "Her daughter learned the hard way." And that morning, between quiet texts and strong coffee, it became clear that it didn't matter where they came from or where they were going. They were finally walking forward, together. The lobby of the Harrington building was everything Emily had always imagined she would hate. Polished black marble floors gleaming like mirrors, receptionists in flawless suits with cold smiles, and air conditioning strong enough to freeze any trace of spontaneity. The sound of heels echoed like ceremonial drums, a place built to impress and to intimidate. And yet, there she was, standing next to Jack. This time, he wasn't in jeans or a sweatshirt. He wore a tailored navy blue suit, modern and elegant. No ring, no symbols of excess, just a man determined to reclaim his name on his own terms. "You sure about this?" she asked as they waited for the elevator. Jack didn't hesitate. "More than ever." "What if they try to swallow you again?" "They already tried. Now I bite back." The elevator arrived. The doors opened, revealing a mirrored interior. Emily stepped in first. Jack stood still for a second, looking at his reflection. This was where it had all begun, and where he'd almost lost himself. But not now. Now he wasn't alone. The 38th floor boardroom was massive, with an entire wall of glass offering a sweeping view of Manhattan's skyline. A dark wooden oval table dominated the room. Around it, 12 men and women, all board members, designer clothes, expensive watches, measured expressions. When Jack entered with Emily at his side, the murmurs stopped. He walked straight to the head of the table, the seat where his father had once sat, where he himself had once sat, Too young, too ambitious, heart numb. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice steady. No one responded enthusiastically. Some nodded, others simply watched. Jack didn't flinch. "Thank you for coming, and even more thank you for listening." One of the board members, a grey-haired man with a stiff expression, Charles Lancaster, the same one who had called Emily weeks earlier, cleared his throat. "Jackson, with all due respect, most of us see your return as symbolic. We expect your image to help stabilize the company's reputation. We're awaiting your approval on the restructuring plan." Jack gave a slight smile. "Cold. Then we're off to a bad start." Silence. "I didn't come back to sign off on what you've already decided. I came back to undo what should never have been done. The restructuring plan will be rewritten, and the new leadership will be built on social responsibility, not just financial return." Another board member scoffed. "Based on what? Idealism?" Jack nodded. "On humanity, on balance. In the 2 years I was gone, I discovered what you pretend doesn't exist, the real world. And I won't return just to feed the same machine. If that's a problem, I'll buy the necessary votes to restructure this board." Faces shifted. Real tension now. Emily sat silently at the back of the room without a formal seat, but present. Jack had insisted she be there, as a witness, as strength. "I want to create a real social impact division," he continued, "and I want 15% of annual net profit redirected to community investment, housing, education, reintegration programs. Will be part of the solution, or we cease to exist." "This is madness," said a woman across the table. "The market won't tolerate charity dressed as management. The market will adapt, or die with the old mindset." Jack paused. "And since we are talking reinvention, let me be clear. Emily Bennett will be my partner in this process, not just my fiancée, a structural part of this new phase." Reactions were immediate, glances exchanged, surprise, even indignation. But Jack remained steady. "Anyone who has a problem with that is free to leave and sell their shares at the current value. I'll buy them." Silence again, this time heavier. Jack looked at Emily for a moment. She kept her chin high, even feeling the full weight of the eyes upon her. "Any objections?" he asked. No one replied. Jack smiled, subtly, then sat at the head of the table. "Let's begin." Later, outside the building, Emily finally exhaled for the first time since the 38th floor. "You dropped a bomb in there." Jack looked at her with warmth. "And you held my hand the whole time. They're going to push back. You know that. I'm counting on it. Change without resistance isn't change. And putting me there as part of the structure," she looked away, "that won't be easy for me." Jack stopped, turned to her gently. "I don't want to expose you, Emily, but I won't hide what makes me stronger either." She blinked, moved, almost spoke but bit it back. Jack pressed on. "You still want to do this with me?" "I do," she said firmly, "but not out of charity or for status. I want to be there because I respect you and because I believe in what you're building." Jack nodded, took her hand again, kissed it softly. "Then you're my partner in everything." They hugged right there on the sidewalk, under the clear New York sky that had no idea what it was about to witness. Jack Harrington Carter was back, but not as a prince, as a man. And he was no longer alone. The official announcement came out on Monday. Jackson Carter reclaims leadership of Harrington Group with focus on social transformation. Waitress named partner in new executive team. The headline splashed across business sites, social media, even a few print newspapers. The photo was of Jack and Emily leaving the building, him in a suit, her in a simple dress with a steady gaze. The caption carried a veiled contempt. The ex-waitress and current fiancé of the billionaire heir will take on a consultative role in the new restructuring initiative. In the comments, the world was split between awe and attack. Modern fairy tale. She deserves it. Seriously, he put his girlfriend in charge of a financial holding. He's obviously lost his mind. You don't go from the streets to the boardroom overnight. She's going to sink everything, Just wait. Emily read everyone, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't help it. Each word felt like a splinter. Even after everything, even with Jack by her side, it was as if the world shouted in unison, "You don't belong here." That night, as she washed dishes, she asked, without turning, "What if they're right?" Jack, seated at the table with reports spread before him, looked up. "Who?" "Those people, the internet, the board, the market, and even your mother, wherever she's rolling her eyes right now." Jack got up, walked over, and turned off the faucet. "They're not the ones who'll live with the consequences. We are. But what if I make a mistake?" "You will. So will I. The difference is, and we'll be making them while trying to do the right thing." Emily looked at him, eyes glassy. "I don't speak their language. I don't understand all the acronyms, the terms. I'm still the girl who used to jot notes on napkins during night shifts." Jack smiled. "And that's exactly why you need to be there, because they've forgotten what it means to serve someone without expecting something in return. You remind me of that every day. And you'll remind them too." She rested her head against his chest. "Promise me something. Anything. If I ever start losing myself, pull me back." Jack hugged her tight. "I'll pull you back. I'll hold you. I'll remind you who you are. But most of all, I'll stand beside you." The following week, Emily attended her first official meeting as part of the company's new social reinvestment division. She wore what she could, a borrowed blazer, heels she could barely walk in, and a necklace her father had given her when she turned 17, her improvised armor. When she walked into the room, all eyes turned. Everyone knew who she was. None of them knew what to expect. She sat, listened, took notes. When they spoke of measurable impact, she asked, "And what about the impact that isn't measurable, like dignity?" Some frowned, others smiled. Jack beside her simply nodded, as if to confirm what he already knew. After the meeting in the hallway, a silver-haired executive with piercing eyes approached. "You're brave." "Or just reckless," Emily replied, half joking. "No, there's something more dangerous in you." "What's that?" "Truth. That scares people more than power." Emily smiled. "Still not sure if that's a compliment." "It is, but it's also a warning." That night, as they tidied up their small apartment, Jack placed 2 glasses of wine on the table and said, "Today when you spoke, the whole room shifted. I was shaking inside. But outside, you were steel." Emily took a sip and smiled. "I still prefer the diner on Lexington Avenue. And I still prefer you there, in jeans and a t-shirt, laughing at arrogant men. But now we're here." Jack nodded. "And we're building a new place, one where no one has to pretend." Emily looked at him, full of gratitude and fear, but fear that now walked hand in hand with hope. "Do you think the world will accept this?" Jack answered without hesitation. "No, but we're not asking for permission." They clinked their glasses, and in that quiet toast, they understood something no headline, spreadsheet, or rumor could define. Belonging isn't about being accepted. It's about resisting. It's about taking up space. It's about transforming, one choice at a time. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.